Hi, students. I'm going to go ahead and continue our readings on David. I asked you to think about the sort of question of is David a good king and is David a good father? How are his mistakes or strengths in either one of those impacting the other role? And are there times that being attentive to one role might sort of lead to tensions in the other role? Kind of vague, but we'll talk more about it in class. The part we're reading today is one of these key moments where we can really see how David's flaws as a father and his flaws as a ruler are connected. And you almost wonder if some of it isn't built into the form of kingship itself, because a court already has so much competition and ambition and striving. And if you add to that heredity, that increases it even more. And then if you add to that polygamy, David has many wives and countless concubines. So he has children from lots of different women who are going to be competing with each other, perhaps in a way that even children in the monogamous court might not be as inclined to be, or at least there's another layer of competition thrown into it because of polygamy. You put all that together, you can see why fatherhood and politics they're difficult to separate, and they're the conditions I'm describing are the conditions of political instability. Maximized, right? The failures of fatherhood aren't just failures of fatherhood, they're failures of political unity, I guess is my point. And we saw Nathan prophesy that the sword will never leave David's house at any point. This is a forever thing. And when we get to the end of the last chapter, his son dies. And so that part of Nathan's pronouncements has happened. We haven't seen anything, though, about the sword, any of that coming true. All of that's set into motion here because this is the beginning of a civil war. So I'm going to go ahead and get started reading, and I'll throw in some commentary as we go, kind of to point out stuff either to pay extra attention to or to give you some useful information. And it happened thereafter, Absalom, David's son, had a beautiful sister named Tamar, and Amnon, David's son, loved her. So here you see Absalom and Tamar are going to be full brother and sister. Amnon is David's son, but the way this is written, it's clear that he is a half-brother. He has a different mother. And Amnon was so distressed that he fell sick over Tamar, his sister, for she was a virgin, and it seemed beyond Amnon to do anything to her. So the virginity here matters for two reasons. One is that there's considered to be, or it's likely a popular belief, that there's a higher penalty for sexual transgression against a virgin at this time in this religion and this culture. So he will be thinking, if I'm going to do this evil thing, this seduction or rape, then I'm going to have more of a sin against God because of this status, would be part of the moral reasoning. But another reasoning is practical, that she is a princess. She's going to play some role in a diplomatic marriage, a political marriage someday. Her virginity is a really important part of that marriage, and it can't be cast into doubt according to the way that their culture works. So there's already in that society going to be a lot of worries about women, when they can be around men, when they can't, kind of like how freely they can move about or how cloistered they are. But that's going to be even more so the case in some ways for her, because she can't have any speculation about her that would endanger these political marriage possibilities. And so, she's probably going to have even more strict rules about how accessible she is, even in her own house. So if he's going to attack her, he's going to have to think of some plan for getting access to her that would have to work around these rules. So this is a part of the reason why he says it seems beyond him to do anything to her. And Amnon had a companion named Jonadab, son of Shemaiah, brother of David. And Jonadab was a very wise man, and he said to him, "Why are you so poorly, prince, morning after morning? Will you not tell me?" And Amnon said to him, "Tamar, the sister of Absalom, my brother, I do love." The footnotes really illuminate what's going on here with us, for us. You might have read them yourself, but one thing to notice is that the way that the Hebrew is written is, the footnote says it's written in a way where when he says, "Tamar, the sister of Absalom, my brother, I do love," it's like halting for gasps of air, or like gasping, or sigh, sigh, sigh. So it's showing that he's out of control. It's showing that he's like a danger, imbalance, something's wrong, something's off. This guy is sick. The other thing that you get is that the word that's chosen to be used here for love is early on in the rabbinical tradition, in the interpretations, that particular form of love is called love that is dependent upon a material thing. Okay, that's how the rabbis in the early days characterized this form of love. Love that's dependent upon a material thing. Another way to put that would be love that is possessive, love that is obsessive, love that is about use, love that is objectifying. So between the use of that form of the word love and the way that he's sort of sighing or gasping for air between his declaration of love, you get the picture that this guy is out of his mind, and also really he's a predator, right? If you love something in this possessive, objectifying way, you don't actually love it. And we'll see, what all of this is leading to in just a bit. And Jonadab said to him, "Lie in your bed and play sick, and when your brother comes to see you, say to him, 'Let Tamar, my sister, pray, come and nourish me with food, and prepare the nourishment before my eyes, so that I may see and eat from her hand.'" And Amnon lay down and played sick, and the king came to see him. And Amnon said to the king, "Let Tamar, my sister, pray, come and shape a couple of heart-shaped dumplings before my eyes, that I may take nourishment from her hand." So, in the original scenario, Jonadab suggests that after he plays sick, it'll be Absalom that comes, and he'll get Absalom to unknowingly set up his sister to be raped. In this case, it's his father who comes. That's what actually happens, and he gets his dad to send her to be attacked unknowingly, right? But the fact that his dad is the one who comes to him this just adds another level of depravity.
Not that it's any better if he would have talked to someone else, but from the narrative's perspective, he's going to attack his sister. So A, he's going to rape someone. B, he's going to attack his sister by pretending to be sick and getting her to come take care of him. And that's how he's going to make her vulnerable. Now, D, he's roped his father into actually sending her to where she's going to be sexually attacked. Nothing is stopping this man. He'll go to any lengths. He's a monster. And David sent to Tamar at home, saying, "Go, pray to the house of Amnon your brother, and prepare nourishment for him." And Tamar went to the house of Amnon her brother, he lying down. And she took the dough and kneaded it, and shaped it into hearts before his eyes, and cooked the dumplings. And she took the pan and set it before him, and he refused to eat. And Amnon said, "Clear out everyone around me." And everyone around him cleared out. And Amnon said to Tamar, "Bring the nourishment into the inner chamber, that I may take nourishment from your hand." So he's found a way not just to be alone with her, but now to take her to an even more isolated place, the inner chamber. And Tamar took the dumplings that she'd made and brought them to Amnon her brother within the chamber. And she offered them to him to eat. So as she's trying to feed him, this is when he attacks. And she offered them to him to eat, and he seized her and said to her, "Come lie with me, my sister." And she said, "Don't, my brother, don't abuse me. For it should not be done thus in Israel. Don't do this scurrilous thing. And where would I carry my shame? And you would be like one of the scurrilous fellows in Israel. And so speak, pray to the king, for he will not withhold me from you." So she's pleading with him. First, don't do this. It's against, the laws of our people, which we've talked before about how religion and secular things are combined for them in a way they aren't for us. So she's not just talking about the mores, she's talking about the laws. And there's going to be punishment and seriousness and gravity to both from the context that they have. It's a violation of the word of God and the word of the king. The next thing she does to plead is to say, what would I do? Right? Like what are you going to leave me with? Where could I go if you do this to me? What will happen to me? The next thing she does to try to plead is she says, what would happen to me? Then she says, well, what would happen to you? You would become like these evil, bad people in our nation, the ones that are outside the law. So she said, I would have a bad fate. You will have a bad fate. And the last thing she does is she tries to bargain. And she sees he's not letting her go. Please just ask our father, ask the king, if you can marry me, so you don't rape me. She would even go that far to make this stop. And Amnon did not want to heed her voice, and he overpowered her and abused her and bedded her. Now, remember how we talked about the particular way that love is being used here? And the love, we know from the footnote, is love dependent upon a material thing. Right after the rape, of course is not love and is use in the ways that we've discussed. You see another level of this because he's revolted by her. So once he's raped her, immediately after, we're told, and Amnon hated her with a very great hatred, for greater was the hatred with which he hated her than the love with which he had loved her. This happens, right? This happens a lot. If you are the object of this sort of obsessive, possessive love, that love is really a lot more like hate in some ways. Also, he's gotten what he wants from her. He has no use for her, and she's going to remind him of what he's done. All of these are reasons that he would hate her for this. And his hate is really intense because his obsession was really intense, and we're told that his hatred is even greater than his obsession. Amnon said, "Get up, go." And she said to him, "Don't. This wrong is greater than the other you did to me to send me away now." That can sound crazy to us, but she's in a terrible position. What she's saying is not what you did isn't that bad or what you did is understandable. What she's saying is that to abandon me after you raped me is even more horrible. Why? Wouldn't it be good if your rapist didn't want to be around you anymore? Well, no, because in this context, the only thing that is going to make this right from the perspective of how they thought about women is for her to marry him. If he marries her, her sort of pollution, because of this, in terms of how the different ancient peoples think of it, it won't be as bad. Because if she goes to marry another man now, she really couldn't. They don't think about this as being something that has happened to her and has left her marriageability intact. So she's saying, I won't be able to marry anyone else, and being able to be married, it's a very serious thing then, because it is how you survive if you're a woman. It is a really frightening thing to not be able to marry, not because of love, but because of survival and being provided for. And so even greater than raping her is abandoning her, because in a sense he would be the only one who could marry her. And she'd even take that and live with that, as horrible as it would be, rather than what other alternatives she's facing. That's how bad the other alternatives are. And like she mentioned, she's gonna have shame. She shouldn't have shame, but she will feel shame, and then in her society they would shame her too. So she says to him, "Don't. This wrong is greater than the other you did me, and to send me away now." He did not want to heed her, and he called his lad, his attendant, and said, "Send this creature." So he's not even a woman, not even a person. "Send this creature, this thing, pray, away from me. Bolt the door behind her." And she had on an ornamented tunic, for the virgin princesses did wear such robes. So virginity of the princesses was so important, and it was even symbolized in their clothes. And his attendant took her outside and bolted the door behind her. And Tamar put ashes on her head, and the ornamented tunic that she had, she tore. She put her hand on her head and walked away, screaming as she went. And Absalom, her brother, said to her, "Has Amnon, your brother, been with you?" the way she's acting afterwards, given everything that's happened before, also likely given just discussion between the servants, which is another I mean, she knows, right? My guess is she would have known pretty early on once she got there. And she would have seen the irregularity of the situation, I'm guessing, for different reasons. Especially once he dismissed everybody. And definitely by the time he makes her come into the inner room. But if she can figure that out, that would mean everyone that had been there in that part of the palace with that prince would also be able to figure out what happened. So there's a good chance that word has spread. And that's another reason that she would think only he would marry her. This is not something that's going to stay between them. So between those factors and also her weeping and putting ashes on her head, that's how they showed public mourning, grief. Her brother puts it together pretty easily. And has Amnon, your brother, been with you? She doesn't answer. For now, my sister, hold your peace. He is your brother. Do not take this matter to heart. Sounds like that's pretty dismissive. It sounds like he's minimizing it. But let's keep reading. And Tamar stayed, desolate, in the house of Absalom, your brother. So one kind of weird thing when I read this the first time, he says, hold your peace. She's saying, don't say anything. He is your brother. So I thought, does he think that being the brother, it means keep it in the family, like don't embarrass us? Or does it mean like he's your brother, like dad won't do anything? He's your brother. Does it mean he's your brother, like maybe we can work this out and we can hide it? Or maybe we can work this out and he can marry you? And then these bad things that happen when, you don't get married won't happen to you. The footnote says that what he might be doing is saying he's your brother. Saying something like, there are rules about how I can avenge you, right? I can't outright avenge you. He is your brother. He's my brother. He's a son of a king. So the normal laws of vengeance won't apply. Maybe he's your brother, so we gotta wait until we figure something out. That's what the footnote says. And that actually kind of fits with, she comes and she lives with him and she's very upset and she's desolate, but you get this idea maybe that they're waiting, they're waiting for something to happen. King David heard all these things and he was greatly incensed. Absalom did not speak with Amnon, either evil or good, for Absalom hated Amnon for having abused Tamar, his sister. And it happened after 2 days that Absalom had a sheep shearing at Baal-Hazor, which is near Ephraim, and Absalom invited all the king's sons. And Absalom came to the king and said, look, pray, your servant has a sheep shearing. Let the king pray go, and his servants with your servant. And the king said to Absalom, no, my son, we shall not all of us go, and we shall not burden you. And he pressed him, but he did not want to go, and he bade him farewell. And Absalom said to him, if not, pray, let Amnon, my brother, go with us. So this kind of seems like a setup. It seems like he knew David wouldn't go. But then he thought, okay, my dad's going to say no, but then he might feel more like he has to send Amnon even though, I'm not talking to Amnon, and he knows that, and he knows what happened. He may feel more inclined to do that because he feels bad about saying no. And the king said to him, why should he go with you? Okay, so kind of what I'm saying, he's like, why would you want him to go? He knows the story. Absalom pressed him, and he sent Amnon with him, together with all the king's sons. And Absalom charged his lads, saying, see, pray, when Amnon's heart is merry with wine, and I say to you, strike down Amnon, you shall put him to death. Fear not, for is it not I who charge you? Be strong, and act as valiant men. One thing is, Amnon, this tells you something else about Amnon. He's an idiot. Like, he's a monster, but he's also stupid if he went to this with this man who hates him. Of course he's going to kill him. He could kill him in any number of ways, right? But, of course it fits. Amnon is like an animal. He's like a beast. He's a predator, and he doesn't have control over his appetites. It makes sense that he would think that, either nothing was going to happen to him, or he could handle whatever would happen. Or he's just thinking about the food and the drink, and the party, and whatever else would happen there. And Absalom's lads did to Amnon as Absalom had charged them. And all the king's sons arose and rode away, each on his mule, and fled. And as they were on the way, the rumor reached David, saying, Absalom has struck down all the king's sons. Not one of them remains. And the king arose and tore his garments and lay on the ground, with all his servants standing in attendance in torn garments. And Jonadab, son of Shimei, brother of David, spoke up and said, let not my lord think all the lads, the king's sons, they've put to death. For Amnon alone is dead, for it was fixed upon by Absalom from the day he abused Tamar his sister. And now let not my lord the king take the matter to heart, saying, all the king's sons have died, but Amnon alone is dead. It's weird that Jonadab's saying that. Jonadab's the one that came up with the rape pretense. And Absalom fled, and the lookout lad raised his eyes and saw, and look, a great crowd was going round the side of the mountain from the road behind it. And Jonadab said to the king, look, the king's sons have come, as your servant has spoken, so it has come about. And just as he finished speaking, look, the king's sons came, and they raised their voices and wept, and the king too. And all his servants wept very grievously. And Absalom had fled. He went to Talmai, son of Ammihur, king of Geshur. And David mourned for his son all the while. And Absalom had fled and gone to Geshur. He was there 3 years. And David's urge to sally forth against Absalom was spent, for he was consoled over Amnon, who was dead. And Joab, son of Zeruiah, knew that the king's mind was on Absalom. And Joab sent to Tekoa and fetched a wise man from there and said to her, take up mourning, and pray don mourning garments. Do not rub yourself with oil, and you shall be like a woman a long while mourning over a dead one. And you shall come to the king and speak to him in this manner. So he says he knows that the king is thinking about Absalom. This is a part of what I mentioned earlier. He seems to be really attached to his sons, at least. I mean, clearly not to his daughters. But, he is missing Absalom. Even though he's done this thing, Joab knows this. Joab's trying to think of a way to get him back, but he's got to do it in a way where is indirect, and basically where David is tricked into doing it. And how do you trick him into doing it? You do what happened with Prophet Nathan. You make up a fake story. David says, oh, well, of course, this is what should happen in this situation. And then you reveal, well, actually, that situation is not real. And actually, I'm talking about you. And now you've said that you would do this if you were in this situation, so now you have to do it. And just do the same thing again. But this time, it's Joab sending this woman to do it. And that is how Absalom is brought back to the kingdom. And the king said to Joab, "Look, pray, I've done this thing." Saying, "Look, I talked to this woman and it turned out she was really talking about something else. And that meant that now I'm committed to bringing Absalom back. Go and bring back the lad Absalom." And Joab flung himself on his face to the ground and bowed down. And he blessed the king. And Joab said, "Your servant knows I have found favor in the eyes of my lord the king, for the king has done what his servant asked." And Joab rose and went to Geshur. He brought Absalom to Jerusalem. And the king said, "Let him turn round to his house, and my face he shall not see." Absalom turned round to his house, and the king's face he did not see. So he can come back, but David's put this boundary, make him focus on his area. Don't let him come to where I am. Don't let him see my face. And that's the deal. Now we're going to find out a little more about Absalom. "And there was no man so highly praised for beauty as Absalom in all Israel, from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. There was no blemish in him. So he was very beautiful, like his sister. And when he cut his hair, from 1 year's end till the next he would cut it, as it grew heavy upon him. He would weigh the hair of his head 200 shekels by the royal weight. And 3 sons were born to Absalom, and a daughter named Tamar. She was a beautiful woman. And Absalom lived in Jerusalem 2 years, but the king's face he did not see. So he's permitted back in Jerusalem, but not to be in the presence of his dad. Absalom sent to Joab in order to send him to the king. He did not want to come to him. So he sent still a second time, but he did not want to come. So Absalom wants to see his dad now. He was trying to get Joab to go and convince his dad to let him see him. Joab's like, "I don't want to get involved." And he said to his servant, "See Joab's field next to mine, in which he has barley. Go set it on fire." It's crazy. And Absalom's servants set fire to the field. And Joab rose and came to Absalom's house and said to him, "Why did your servant set fire to the field that belongs to me?" Absalom said to Joab, "Look, I went to you saying, 'Come here,' that I may send you to the king, saying, 'Why did I come from Geshur? It would be better for me were I still there. Now let me see the face of the king. If there be guilt in me, let him put me to death." After this encounter happens is when the civil war begins. So was he upset by it? Was there something about their encounter that caused him to be even more angry with his father than he already was? His anger with his father is over the father not defending the sister. So did what David do in that moment bring out a similar resentment? Sort of like, you sent me away, even though I just did what you didn't do, and what you should have done. Then you bring me back, but you won't let me see you. And now, I'm really angry. And whatever happened in the encounter, I'm more angry. Or is it that he had been plotting the way he plotted for so long to kill his brother? Had he been plotting about how he was going to attack his father? And that meeting was the beginning of it. On to the next chapter. And it happened thereafter that Absalom made himself a chariot with horses and 50 men running before him. And Absalom would rise early and stand by the gate road, and so to every man who had a suit to appear in judgment before the king, Absalom would call and say, "From what town are you?" And he would say, "From one of the tribes of Israel is your servant." And Absalom would say to him, "See, your words are good and right, But you have no one to listen to you from the king. And Absalom would say, would that I were made judge in the land, and to me every man would come who would assume injustice, and I would declare in his favor. And so, when a man would draw near to bow down to him, he would reach out his hand and take hold of him and kiss him. And Absalom would act in this fashion to all the Israelites who appeared in judgment before the king. And Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. This is interesting because he's definitely being dishonest with these men, and he's definitely using them for power, right? Basically trying to make them his dependents, right? Like, the king won't do this for you, but I will. And it's part of a strategy of gaining the support to be able to eventually seize power. And it says, it's working. He gets the hearts of the men of Israel. And when the man wants to bow, he interrupts. And instead of having him lower himself, he gives a gesture that has more equality or more dignity. But, there's also the possibility that he's being like demagogic, but he's also, maybe pointing to something real. It could be that the king isn't doing a good job of listening to people. It could be he doesn't have time for these individual Israelites to figure out what's going on with them and help them. Or it could be, he's got a big administration, a lot of bureaucracy. He's really checked out from it. We don't know. Absalom probably is filling some kind of gap, and that's what makes this possible. So it's not just all on Absalom, what's happening here, though clearly, there's problems. But something David has done as a ruler, his failures and inattentiveness as a ruler, are allowing the window of opportunity for Absalom to come in and act. And odds are, for Absalom, he sees his father as a failure of a father, and he's taking advantage of his failure as a king, too. And it happened at the end of 4 years that Absalom said to the king, let me go, pray, and pay my vow that I pledged to the Lord in Hebron. For your servant made a vow when I was staying in Geshur in Aram, saying, so when I was exiled, if the Lord indeed brings me back to Jerusalem, I shall worship the Lord. And the king said to him, go in peace to Hebron. So he knows what to tell his dad, to get his dad to be like, yeah, that's a good idea, go. And he arose and went to Hebron. And Absalom sent agents through all the tribes of Israel, saying, when you hear the sound of the ram's horn, you shall say, Absalom has become king in Hebron. So this is coordinated, meaning it's been planned. They're expecting him to basically send them a message that he's gone to this other place to launch the war, and that he'll give them a signal and they can join in. So the tribes are ready for this. They're ready to get rid of David for the sake of Absalom. And, it says that this is at the end of 4 years. So again, you see Absalom playing the long, long, long game. So he starts off by, waiting and meeting these men and doing for them what the king doesn't do. Who else knows what inroads he made like that within those 4 years? But whatever he did is enough that he's able to say, hey, it's time to overthrow the king. Wait for my word. We're doing it now. And then they're ready to do it. And with Absalom, 200 men went from Jerusalem, invited guests, going in all innocence, and they knew nothing. So he gets permission to go from his dad. And then he brings 200 men with him. They don't know that a coup's happening. And Absalom sent Ahithophel the Gilonite, David's counselor, from his town, from Galo, while he was offering the sacrifices, and the conspiracy was strong, and the people with Absalom were growing in number. And the informant came to David, saying, "The hearts of the men of Israel are following Absalom." And David said to all his servants who were with him in Jerusalem, "Rise and let us flee, or none of us will escape from Absalom. Hurry and go, lest he hurry and overtake us and bring down evil upon us and strike the city with the edge of the sword." This is interesting because David isn't he's older, but he's battle hardened, and he's also the king. And he is in, his stronghold, supposedly. But he hears this is happening, and he's like, we gotta flee. And so that could be really perceptive and come from experience on his part. Also, it's kind of sad because remember, he was always fleeing from Saul, and he'd have to go live in the wilderness and stuff. So maybe it's just what he's used to or what he's reminded of. But it could also be that, Absalom is like dangerous. He knows he's cunning. And he's like, oh gosh, okay, we got to get away. He's got something planned, so we got to get out of here. And then we can live to fight another day. And it's interesting, he says, bring down evil upon us and strike the city with the edge of the sword. So he's not worried. It's written like he's not worried just about himself, but he's thinking war is going to ravage the city. It's just going to destroy it, meaning destroy the people. And it's true, civil war tends to be the most destructive type of war that there is. And the king's servant said to the king, "Whatever my lord the king chooses, look, we are your servants." And the king went out, and all his household with him on foot, and the king left his 10 concubines to watch over the house. And the king and all the people with him went on foot, and they stopped by the outlying house. And all his servants were crossing over alongside him, and all the Kerethites and the Pelethites and all the Gileadites, 600 men, who'd come at his heels from Gath, were crossing before the king. And the king said to Ittai the Gittite, "Why should you go with us too? Go back, stay with the king, for you are a foreigner, you are an exile from your own place. Just yesterday you came, and today should I make you wander with us, when I myself am going to wherever I may go? Turn back, and bring back your brothers, steadfast kindness to you." And Ittai answered the king and said, "As the Lord lives, and as my lord the king lives, whatever place that my lord the king may be, whether for death or for life, there your servant will be." And David said, "Go and cross over." And Ittai crossed over, and all his men and all the children who were with him. And all the land was weeping loudly. All the people were crossing over, and the king was crossing over the Wadi Kidron. All the people were crossing over along the road to the wilderness. And look, Zadok and all the Levites were also with him, bearing the ark of the covenant of God, and they set down the ark of God, and Abiathar came up, until all the people had finished crossing over from the city. And the king said to Zadok, "Bring back the ark of God to the city. Should I find favor in the eyes of the Lord, he will bring me back, and let me see it in its abode. And he should say that, and should he say thus, I want no part of you, let him do to me what is good in his eyes." And the king said to Zadok the priest, "Do you see? Go back to the city in peace, and Ahimaaz your son, and Jonathan, son of Abiathar, your 2 sons with you. See, I shall be tarrying in the steppes of the wilderness until word from you reaches me to inform me." And Zadok and Abiathar with him brought back the ark of God to Jerusalem and stayed there. It's interesting that he sends the ark back. The ark is associated with God's presence, obviously, but also with power, and literally even power in war. But he sends it back to Jerusalem. And we could talk about why. I'm speculating, there's one point in David's better nature and his better days where he compares his stability and wealth to the fact that God does not have a temple. And that's, I think, the characteristic that makes him be a man after God's own heart. Not just from the perspective of God's like, oh, well, he's thinking of me, but, he thinks of the city, what's best for the city. He thinks about kind of what's fitting, for, I guess, well, what's fitting? That's the right way to put it. What is fitting for a god? What is fitting for his people? And not thinking about expedience or greed. Though that's him in his best moments. And I think that's what it appeals to him in this narrative. That's what is appealing about him to God when the narrative begins by saying, he's a man after God's own heart. It's also what tends to make him appealing to the reader, even though he does terrible things. And Zadok and Abiathar with him brought back the Ark of God to Jerusalem, and they stayed there. Also, David seems content to have God's judgment. He says, if God says, I want no part of you, it's okay with me. Or not okay with me, but, I accept it. There's a sense. He's saying I deserve it. And David was going up the slope of Olives, going up weeping, his head uncovered, and he walking barefoot, and all the people who were with him, everyone with his head uncovered, went on up weeping the while. And to David it was told, saying, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. And David said, thou art to pray the counsel of Ahithophel, O Lord. Ahithophel's a big problem. You're going to see it coming, and my guess is David knows this right away. He knows it's bad news that he has switched sides. And David had come to the summit where one would bow down to God, and look, coming toward him was Hushai the Archite, his tunic torn and earth on his head. So here comes one of his counselors, tunic torn, earth on his head. That's what Tamar did when she was in grief over being raped. Hushai is feeling grief. David said, if you cross over with me, you'll be a burden to me. But if you go back to the city and say to Absalom, your servant, O king, I will be. Your father's servant I always was. Now I am your servant. You shall overturn Ahithophel's counsel for me. Are not Zadok and Abiathar, the priests, there with you? The ones he sent back. And so, whatever you hear from the king's house, you shall tell to Zadok and to Abiathar, the priests. This is interesting, too, because it seems to be implied in the course of the narrative. After David makes a sacrifice of sending the ark to Jerusalem, it seems that God, this is how it would be written, very intentionally. After David makes a sacrifice, he gets the grace of Hushai the Archite coming. After finding out the bad news of Ahithophel and praying to God, hey, help me out with this, that's when Hushai shows up. So definitely this is sort of the chain of events in the narrative. And because he'd made the sacrifice of sending the ark back, if he sends this guy as a double agent, he has messengers ready to go to communicate with him, who he knows will be on his side already. And so whatever you hear from the king's house, you shall tell to Zadok and Abiathar the priests. Look, there with them are their two sons, Ahimaaz, who's Zadok's, and Jonathan, who's Abiathar's. And you shall send by their hand to me whatever you hear. And Hushai, David's friend, came to the city as Absalom was coming into Jerusalem. We'll talk more about these readings in class. You're seeing the lead up to the Civil War and everything behind it. And the next time will be sort of what happens in that war.
I want to raise a few questions. One is, if you're thinking about this from the perspective of Absalom, you you might feel justified in doing what he's doing. Um, you might even say that he is right in doing what he's doing because his father has shown so much, I guess, failure, right? In any of the important roles. Um, and that the ways that Absalom and his sister suffered from the failures of the father is how the kingdom suffers from the failures of the king. That's a very important point, and I think the text is really clear about that. The idea that because of the failures of David, Absalom is justified in what he's doing, though it would not be something that I think the text supports, because David is anointed by God, and no prophet has revoked the anointing. And generally, the idea that someone who is tyrannical loses the mandate to rule um, is not as readily accepted in ancient thought as it is for us. So, you know, I think that part of the thing we want to do is inhabit the story, and we want to ask ourselves questions about it from our perspective. Absolutely. And it helps us to get inside the heads of the people there too. That helps us to form our perspective. We will say, well, how would I feel in this situation, or what would I think is wise in this situation? But we also need to be able to try our best as much as we can, because it's not possible to do this perfectly, but to kind of imagine the moral universe of the text and put ourselves there. And I think you would see that Absalom, the text is showing he's extremely cunning. David's cunning too. He's really beautiful. He's very charming, and he may actually have some good points, and he certainly has grievances that are real. But with all of those talents, that's not going to make him a more legitimate um, actor. He's still trying to be a usurper, and specifically a usurper against his father, which in any sort of ancient context would be extremely, extremely morally pernicious, because the idea would be that the father gave you life, and so that you will use what he's given you um, against him, right? Would be kind of automatically or fundamentally reprehensible. Um, Socrates deals with this when he is uh, discussing sort of the problem of illegitimate rule in the Crito. And he talks about how he is he is the son of the laws, and the laws of Athens have given him everything that has allowed him to become what he is, even in their failures, in a sense, in the ways that he's had to respond to it, and that he's a loyal critic, right? So his intent is not to destroy Athens, but to purify it, right? And this is the reason that he will not engage in open rebellion, even while he's engaging in critique. Now, people at that time, and we presently, right, we may have lots of problems with what Socrates says there, but that kind of opinion might be more like the sensibilities of this text. If you think about it, the prophets come in, they're extremely powerful, extremely critical, but they never raised rebellion. And you should kind of try to think about this space. And if you can't raise rebellion, well, what can you do? Well, what the prophets do is they critique, and this is Socrates, this is Nathan, this is Samuel. You're like, why am I talking about Socrates? Is really important. He connects a bunch of this for us. He's not like in this text. That's not what I mean. But um, and ultimately, the prophet is willing to do that to the point that they may lose their lives, right, in service of the purification of the regime. Um, in this context and in the accounts of Plato, that's actually also a kind of divine place to inhabit. So, let me think if I have any other concluding point before we move along. Hmm. I guess the last thing I would say is from the perspective of David. You can try to inhabit that space too. And I alluded to this as I was reading, but when we know that David is after the heart of God, a man after God's own heart, right, is how it's described in the beginning. One of the questions you should be asking the whole time we're studying this is, well, what does that even mean? Um, he is described in the beginning as handsome. He's clearly very clever. He's also strong. He's a fantastic warrior. All of this becomes clear, pretty evident early on. And um, even as a child, we're told these kind of positive things about him. But Samuel passes over sort of what you might think of as the more developed versions of him. It's his brothers. They're grown up. They would have his physical beauty. The text talks about that. They would have all that, but they wouldn't be a child. So why would God go for David when he could kind of have these like David, the finished product? Well, the point is that the brothers are not David, the finished product. There's something different about David. Well, what is that? Okay, it's not just that he's good in battle, and it's not just that he's clever. It's not just that he's handsome. Saul apparently was really handsome and also super tall. Absalom is supposed to be gorgeous and is winning the hearts of men. So it's also not just charisma, though David has charisma too. These other people that I'm mentioning have a lot of the characteristics that David has. So there's something singular about him that catches God's notice, because these other people have versions of what he has too. So what is that? Well, it's certainly not that he always acts perfectly, because from a moral perspective, he's a disaster. And he's done some extremely bad things. So it isn't that, you know, he's like hyper ethical either. So what is it? And I think you saw maybe we've seen a flash of it at different points. So when he has consciousness about the discrepancy between his home and palace and kind of their place of worship, if in ancient times, I talked about this last time, if you had like a temple you carry around, I mean, the implication could be you don't really care about your gods. You're supposed to have these beautiful, amazing things dedicated to your gods, especially sort of your chief god in other cultures. And so if they're establishing this kingdom, it would look odd from the perspective of the time that their God is still dwelling in a tent. Well, in order to have him properly inhabit a temple, you would find, if we kept reading, that this is what Solomon undertakes, and that it's supposed to be really grand and really special and really holy. Well, David is aware, right? Wow, it's weird that I have this place and we are still having an Ark of the Covenant situation when it comes to our worship. That takes a level of humility, actually, of being able to think outside of yourself, and think about the bigger picture, and that your sort of powers, talents, any of those things aren't getting to your head, so much that the world around you is shaped from the perspective of you and you alone, right? And God is shaping his perspective in a way. His love of God is. And then also, you see in other places his care for the people of Israel. Now, um, that goes away, at least temporarily. But you also see, kind of, at when we talked last time about his son being likely to die right after Nathan talks to him. And at first, maybe, David goes into that mourning and fasting because he doesn't want Nathan to be right. He doesn't want Nathan's pronouncements to be right, that the son dies, but also that the kingdom is going to implode in the way it does, which, by the way, everything that happens with Absalom is exactly what Nathan uh, prophesied. So you could take a cynical view and be like, well, he's really praying and fasting because he doesn't want any of this to be true, because his kingdom is in jeopardy. If the son dies, it's a sign of that. But as you keep reading, you see that he seems to have um, a devotion to his male children, at least, um, that in some ways seems to take him out of the conceits and vanities of kingship. And you'll want to definitely keep an eye on that as we keep reading, because of where things go with Absalom and how he acts about Absalom. That's another, sort of unique thing about David, from perhaps our question of, well, what is it that makes him special? The other thing is, we've started to see it here, is when he flees, um he shows humility again. He's not indignant, like, how can he do this, right? Um, he's like also not super proud, like, I'm gonna stay in the city, I'm gonna defend it, it's mine. He makes the best strategic decision, which is, I gotta get out of here and take these people with me, because he has had so long to plan. This is clearly a while in the making. I've seen the way that he moves and how he plans, and I know that Israelites are behind him now. This has been a long-term project. I need space and I need time. And that's what fleeing gets him. So you see his willingness to sort of not use, like, I don't know, not to be like, oh, I'm the king, chest thump, da da da, I'm staying here. Now, again, you could say, well, maybe he's just being strategic. Maybe this isn't humility as much as cleverness, and that's a real possibility. But again, I think you see it a bit differently when he sends the ark back. He's like, this is the holy city of Jerusalem. It is appropriate for both our ark, which is our temple, and for our people, that the Ark of the Covenant return to the city. And this means, right, that he doesn't have it at a time when he's extremely vulnerable, and you would think he'd want to hold on to it, if not for emotional consolation, at least for the sign of legitimacy of his kingship, by sending God literally like this temple back to Jerusalem when that's where Absalom is. Like, from a political perspective, it could look like, well, now Absalom is here in Jerusalem. He's saying that he's the king, and now the Ark of the Covenant's here. So, it must be the case that he is. David and the Ark of the Covenant are separated. Maybe this is a separation of the divine mandate that he has to rule from King David, and a transition of it to the son. But David had to have known that when he made the decision he did. So personally and politically, that decision is not a decision that's in his interest whatsoever, but it is a decision that prioritizes a in the text, the proper worship of God and the fittingness of the people of God being with the ark and protected by it. Um, that's what David is prioritizing. And he then even goes so far as to say, maybe it'll be the case that God is unhappy with me. What he means when he says that is, in a way, not just God is unhappy with me um because I've done these bad things, but also, maybe God doesn't want me to be king anymore. Maybe God is taking away his anointing from me the way he took it away from Saul. And you see him again with humility accept that possibility and accept that he could deserve that. He would deserve that. And he says, if that's what God decides, I obey. So these are the things I think that are unique about David. I think this is what the text is telling us. What makes him sort of the pinnacle of the people around. And if you're at all familiar with the tradition he comes out of, then you know that he's famous for writing these psalms. A lot of them are about repentance for sin and for sorrow and of sin and sort of for love of God. He has a lot of passion for God and also, begs to see God's face again when he's made a mistake. And to bring Socrates back into things, what makes Socrates who he is, we'll find eventually, is his humility too. And his humility is particularly understood as that he knows that he doesn't know. David's is that he knows when he's done wrong, and can admit it. So these are all things to keep track of and just have in your mind as we keep going through these readings and as the course keeps going on. And you probably can hear my dog in the background, so I'm sorry.